last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live from a tiny studio somewhere in North America. This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host, the silverback of ufology. Here's Don Ecker.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Dark Matters Radio. Here we are, 1 week of July. Boom, it's gone. Before you know it, hell, it's going to be September. The kids are going to be back in school. The next thing looking at us will be Halloween. I mean, where in the hell is the year going? Well, let me tell you, tonight we're going to do a little twist, okay? This is going to be a little different, and I'll tell you in a second why, but this past week, you know, I've been slowly healing. I've been having some problems with my back. It's been a real pain in the rumpus, but I've been working through it. You know, I've been every day getting a little bit better. And in the middle of all that, the 4th of July popped up, which since I've been a little kid, always been one of my favorite national holidays. Because, quite frankly, I love this country. My parents loved this country, my grandparents, my family, literally, dating back to the American Revolution on my mother's side. We had representatives at every damned scrabble and fight that this country has gotten into, all the way up to today. Now, with that being said, I was thinking, you know, maybe it's time to do a change-up with Dark Matters Radio. Now, if you've been watching me, if you've been following me for any length of time, you know that I've been involved in this UFO business going back literally multiple decades. I was the director of research for UFO Magazine. But the fact of the matter is, time goes on, people drift in, drift out. A lot of people really don't have a clue what the heck we've been up to. So I thought about that. Then I talked to my two co-hosts, Mark Center and Gerry Kissell, and I said, guys, I've got an idea. You tell me what you think. I said, every week, we try to have a new guest on here with information about what's happening in the field. I mean, going back just in the last couple of years, things like the Tic Tac business, things like the Pascagoula case, many other things that we've kicked around. The egg a few months back. Well, I thought maybe it's time that I get interviewed on Dark Matters Radio. I told Gerry and I told Mark, I said, you guys, what do you think about that? And they both agreed. Then they both threatened me. Okay. He said, oh boy, wait till we get you on. And I said, guys, come on, be gentle, be gentle. So anyway, tonight, that's what we're going to do. So I am going to relinquish the reins of the show over to Gerry and Mark. And hey, this probably will be as surprising to me as it is to you. So stick around because that's what we're going to do.
Good afternoon.
Hey, it's Mark.
Dark Matters Radio. Welcome to the Abbott and Costello of the UFO game.
The Laurel and Hardy.
All right. And I'm all for it. Asking Don a few questions, both in the back.
Because there's so many things that we know about Don that we don't get to talk about much. And Bill Skywatcher is here to make sure that we're fired if we go over the line.
So we're back on the spot because you know how direct he is and blunt. Well, you guys gotta return the favor now. So I'll be watching. I'm not getting involved, and I'll be in the because I'm not gonna do it. But I'm looking forward to you guys entering and Mark, you know Don for so many years. So
I've known Don since the early 90s when the autopsy was released. I tracked him down through his magazine. I started to fax him and call him. He didn't know me from Adam. I saw him at conventions before that and would ask questions of him and was shut down almost every time. You moron! But I've known him a long time, and through happenstance and lunatics in the field, we kind of got back in touch and have stayed in touch almost on a daily basis since then. We talk about movies and books and what's going on, not just the UFO stuff. We get a little tired of that, but yeah.
And Gerry has the military connection as a veteran himself. With Don, and they have their little relationship there too, as well as Pop Culture Minefield, doing all that stuff with you, Gerry. So both of you are more than familiar with the Silverback. So without any further ado, good luck. I'll be watching. I'm glad I'm not on because I'm not getting in trouble. That's up for you two to do. But without any further ado, see you guys, and let's bring on. You wanna do a formal introduction? Does he even need one on Dark Matters?
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, the Silverback of ufology, former editorial director of UFO Magazine.
God damn it, director of research.
Yeah, I don't have a script in front of me. I tried to, because I thought about it all week, what I'm going to do. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to do what I've always done. It's something you and I like doing is stream of conscious discussion. I know so much about your past, but at the same time, there are so many things about your past that I've always been curious about and have been terrified to ask. And I'm not going to say why I'm terrified. All right. You're a scary dude.
Well, here.
You're a beloved friend of ours, too.
Let's start this current, though, all right? I heard a little bit of Don talking to Skywatcher about Russ Coulthart and what he just said. So I'd like to start this off just a little more current, that Rustifer Corthothus came out and said that he knows beyond the shadow of a doubt that the Tic Tac is Lockheed Martin technology. And he just came out and said this on some show. So I sent this out to you two guys. And in a general sense, I'm wondering from Don if he wants to throw some shade, not only at that statement or not, or at Russ himself, who has an interesting background. Do you take what he says as gospel, or do you take it as more statements from Russ that are seemingly never confirmed?
Well, okay, that's a great place to start. And I didn't know much about Coulthard. Did a little checking on him, found out some of his background. Some of it appeared a little shady. He's originally a UK guy, Great Britain. He got himself in a mess over there at some point with the British monarchy. I don't know what all the ins and the outs of that was about, but suddenly he got himself involved in the UFO thing. Now, a number of months ago, okay, and Coulthard even, if I'm not mistaken, he was even interviewed by Tucker Carlson, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And very, on the surface, very pro UFO guy. But look, I'm going to tell you something that in all the years, now the decades that I've been involved in this, and maybe it's in part because I've been in it so long, maybe in part because, yes, I indeed am becoming somewhat of a curmudgeon, but I get really ticked at a lot of these brand newbies. In NAM, we would call them FNGs or cherries, okay, or fresh meat. They get introduced to it and they go running off, waving their arms about this, that, and something else without an iota of grounded research in the majority of them. Now, with Coulthard, the thing that just absolutely turned me off, and I just discarded the guy as any kind of a source, was a number of months back with the egg video. Now, before this egg video came out, I went up to the news service that he reports on, and they were touting this as a genuine game changer, right? This was going to flip the whole UFO movement on its ear. And so I got to say, sure, I was interested. What in the heck did this guy dig up? Did he dig up something? And then the day came. I was glued to the tube. I watched this story, and I got to say, I had a bellyache when the damn thing was over. It was in my opinion now, okay, I'm not trying to sway anybody. I'm just telling you from somebody that's been involved in this shit for a very long time. I was not even this much impressed. Now, why? Well, for one thing, I've seen in my time a literal 1,000 tons of helicopters. I've flown in them. I've landed in them. I've taken off in them. I'm not a pilot. I mean, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But I've seen them bring in pallets of supplies, all kinds of things like that. I looked at this video, and anybody with this much gray matter could have looked at that and said, wait a minute, there's something that ain't right. A helicopter, when it's flying or when it's hovering or when it's trying to lift or land something on the ground, has a tremendous backwash. Okay. I saw this thing dropping this egg-looking crap on the ground, not a scintilla of anything with the cable that supposedly was there. No backwash on the grass. I didn't see the grass flowing around. Didn't see anything. And I said, wait a minute. This can't be right. And then the interview that Coulthard had with the guy, and he started talking about a feminine source intruding into his consciousness and all this other bullshit. And I said, nah, this guy is full of it. So from that point forward, Coulthard was nothing to me. This guy is just another asshat clowning around in the field, loving his time on the TV, on the screen, and that's about it. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. Just a quick follow-up before Gerry gets going. Would you put this in the same asshat basket, or would you put the people in the same asshat basket as Lou, Corbell, and even George Knapp to some extent nowadays? And look, we're staying quiet on this because we could go back and forth. This is about you. This whole, all these new people who have jumped into this, similar to the 90s. Some are still here, Greers, some are still not.
Some are still not.
would you put it in that same, all these people in that same sort of deal where, what's your view of what they're looking for most importantly? All of these new people, what are they after? What are they looking for?
Well, on the surface, they'll tell you they're looking for the truth. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, each of those people you mentioned, you can't clump them into one group. Okay. You got to look at them. And this comes from when I was a criminal investigator. You got to look at each one individually. You mentioned Jeremy
Corbell.
Okay. I don't know Corbell. I did one time interview him with George Knapp a number of years ago. And if I remember correctly, it was not on KGRA digital broadcasting, but it was on Cyberstation USA. I'd have to go back and check. Mm-hmm. I mean, Jesus, guys, I've been broadcasting since 91. Okay. A lot of these things now are running together in my head. But anyway, I did interview him. I got to say that I was not impressed by anything he said then. Then I saw the documentary, air quotes, he did on Bob Lazar. Now, a lot of people may not be aware of this, but I've been on the Lazar case since it broached back in '88, while he was still not identified, only as Dennis, an electronic blackout. Then shortly thereafter, George Knapp, and I've known George, my God, I've known him actually longer than I know you, Mark.
Right.
But George, when he finally revealed him, I got my butt down to Vegas. Okay. Now, a lot was happening then. A lot was happening with Lazar. A lot of stuff that was not public knowledge at that time, I was aware of, okay? Not only through my personal relationship with Knapp, but also after I met Lazar. I've been to his home several times when he was still living in Las Vegas, interviewed him in there. As a matter of fact, Richie Saraday, dear man, I loved the guy like a brother, departed now. He died 5 years ago, cancer. And he's still a guy. And Mark, you know this.
Yep.
I miss him every day. He was just a fantastic human being. Anyway, we went down there. We interviewed him. And Rich and I also had some adventures down there in Vegas. But anyway, I had a real strong feel for this case. Now, when Corbell did the documentary on him, okay, and this is just my impression. I got the impression it was more about Jeremy Corbell than it was about Bob Lazar, okay? He made sure he told the audience how deeply embedded he was with this. Him and George Knapp are like that, okay? I guess trying to bolster his bona fides, because who the hell knew who Jeremy Corbell was before any of this? All right. I don't know. That's my read on it. Maybe I'm full of it. I don't think so. But that was him. Now, some of these other people you mentioned, what were
Lou?
The other?
Lou.
Elizondo.
Who's
okay.
Lou?
I never made secret of this. I've talked about it here on this show. You know, when I was a police officer and a criminal investigator, just like anybody that's been any time in that field, wearing that badge, being behind the badge, one of the ways that a lot of crimes get solved finally are through confidential informants. All right. And that's just, a lot of people may hear that and get turned off. Well, sorry, tough shit about that, because that's the way the world works. Now, with that being said, if I had a CI, okay, that I caught intentionally lying to me one time, just once, from that point, now I'm talking about intentionally, not by mistake or misunderstanding, somebody that deliberately went out of their way to bullshit me. That was it with that person, okay? I wouldn't trust them any further than I could pick them up and throw them. Well, Lou Elizondo, I first was exposed to him on the History Channel series that ran for, I think, 2 seasons, Unidentified. And I watched that. I watched every episode of that show. Why? Well, for one thing, at that time, in all the years that I had been a participant in this as a researcher, director of research for UFO Magazine, my time in the field, my time interviewing people, my time interviewing cases, because I was out there on cases too. Okay, I wanted to see what the hell this was all about. And the people involved in that program, I got to say, the names, some of them blew me away. Mm-hmm. Christopher Mellon, a former Undersecretary of State on Intelligence Matters. Elizondo and his purported job at the Pentagon. Hal Puthoff, okay, who was a CIA scientist. I mean, all these guys have been crossing my debt. Well, Puthoff has, not Mellon, not Elizondo. But the guy from, and I can't think of his name now, from the Skunk Works at Lockheed. Skinner? Was it Skinner, I believe?
I think so.
Yeah. Well, at any rate. And then, of course, Tom DeLonge. Now, when I saw that, boom, I said, what in the hell is going on? Tom DeLonge? Blink 182?
Yep.
What the hell's he doing there with these alleged heavyweights? I never could figure that out, but I watched it, okay? And I got to say, I was intrigued. Well, then it went off the air. And another very good friend of mine who now, unfortunately, is also no longer with us, Tracy Torme, okay, screenwriter, movie producer, you name it. Tracy was in the middle of Hollywood. The guy that brought us Fire in the Sky. The guy that brought us, what the hell was that TV show?
Sliders.
Yeah, Sliders. I mean, this guy was no lightweight.
Yep.
And he called me up and he said, Don, he said, have you been watching this Unidentified? And I said, yeah, we chatted about that because Tracy had a very deep, abiding interest in the topic, in the subject. And he said, well, this Lou Elizondo, he said, do you know him? And I said, no, I don't know him. He said, well, I'm going to try to track him down. Well, he did. Okay. They started talking. Elizondo obviously knew who Tracy was, knew who his dad was. Mel Torme, the Velvet Fog. Okay. Oh, for decades, a singer that, you know, his fame went around the world. So when Tracy got back to me and I said, hey, well, I got a question. I said, you know, I'd love to interview him on Dark Matters Radio. I said, would you ask him if he would mind if you gave me his telephone number, and when it's convenient, I'd like to call him and talk to him. So he said, sure. So he did. Now, I'm only going on my cop mentality right now, okay, with what I'm about to tell you. This is what I think happened. I can't prove it, couldn't go to court and testify, but this is what I think, and I'm pretty good at figuring things out. You guys know that. Mm-hmm. You've known me long enough to know that. So anyway, I finally call him, and I told him, I said, Lou, this is Don Ecker, Dark Matters Radio. Tracy said that, blah, blah, blah. He said, oh, man, I can't talk to you. He said, I'm up to my eyebrows in alligators right now. He said, I got your number here. He said, I'll call you this weekend, then we can talk. I said, cool. So, buddy, that whole weekend, I spent real close to my telephone. Never heard a word, not a word. So I let a few days go by because I didn't want to seem like I was, pushing him. But I let a few days go by. Then I called him up again. And I said, hey, Lou, it's Don Ecker. I waited for your call. You never, oh man, I've been so bad. He did it to me again. Okay. He shined me on for a second time, but he was going to call me on the weekend. Okay. Well, the next weekend came, the next weekend went, and it didn't take a freaking house to fall on me that this guy put me on the shine. He was ghosting me. Okay. Why? Well, then I put my cop mentality to work. Back in the early 90s, I embarrassed the Pentagon badly. Okay? I broke 2 stories, not just in the magazine, but on national television. One story I broke on Larry King Live involved the Phobos 2 Soviet probe encounter with a huge something in Mars orbit that was destroyed. Now, where did I originally get that information? Well, a very close, personal, and I loved the man, friend of mine was Zacharias Sitchin, okay? The guy that brought us, you ready? The Anunnaki. Everybody's talking about the Anunnaki today. Nobody had ever heard of it before Sitchin's series of books came out. And in his book, Genesis Revisited, all right, he talked about that probe. Well, then I met Dr. Marina Popovich. Who the hell was she? Well, Marina Popovich was the former Soviet Union's answer to Chuck Yeager. Do you know who Chuck Yeager was? Look him up online. I'm not going to sit here and tell you about Yeager. But I will say this. Yeager was the first guy that broke the sound barrier in his aircraft, a rocket plane called the Glamorous Glennis, I think it was. Well, Marina was also a retired Red Air Force pilot who went through cosmonaut training. She was one of the elite of the old Soviet Union. Her former husband, as she told me, before he ran off, dumped her for his much younger secretary, had been General Pavel Popovich, the first human being in history to rendezvous with another spacecraft in space, okay, back in about 1962. Now, not only did she tell me about that, she told me about a lot of UFO incidents and cases that happened in the Soviet Union, including Russian attempts to shoot down UFOs and what happened to them. Well, she told me and brought me the photograph. If you go up online on your search browser and you see a picture of her holding that photo of the Martian moon Phobos and this thing behind the Martian moon, okay, I was the guy that brought that originally to the public because she had given me a copy of it. And I was on Larry King Live when I showed it for the first time. Okay, then we ran it in UFO Magazine. Well, there was a lot of heartburn over that from sources unnamed because as it turned out, NASA, never a straight answer, NASA was part of that program, Phobos 2. Why? Well, at that time, there was behind-the-scenes chatter between between NASA and Glavkosmos, the Soviet space agency. They were talking about the possibility of a joint mission to Mars using Russian cosmonauts and American astronauts. All right. This is back in the very early 90s. And the date at that time they were planning for was around 2014, 2015. Well, of course, those years came, they went, never happened. But that's what they were talking about then. Well, that was one incident. The other incident happened in 1992. The end of May and in June of 92, I broke the story of the space shuttle mission STS-48 and its encounter with a unknown object and what could only have been an attempt to shoot that object down. Now, at that time, Vicki and I, my wife, who was the publisher, she and I had a source back in Washington, D.C., somebody that worked in a defense publication. And we got a lot of behind the scene, not anything classified, obviously, but we got a lot of things from this source that panned out and we used in the pages of UFO Magazine. So about a day, 2 days after my appearance on Larry King Live with the STS-48 story, I get a call from this guy. And he said, hey, Don, he said, what's been the feedback since your appearance on King? And I said, well, to tell you the truth, nothing. I said, we haven't heard a word from anybody. And hell, at that time, I thought that news organizations around the damn country, not to mention in Europe and other places, would have called up, because CNN with Larry King went around the globe. It was not just a national show. It was international. Never heard a word. And this person then said, well, I can tell you this. And I said, okay, what? He said, buddy, you have managed to piss off a whole bunch of people in the Pentagon. And do you know what else? And I said, no. He said, well, at that time, as you know, they had a live feed from these missions coming down. That feed has since been encrypted. You no longer get a live feed, and anything you see coming from space after that, which was the end of June of 1992, will have been vetted or is in timed release. So I pissed off people at the Pentagon. Now, I'm presuming that Elizondo talked to somebody at the Pentagon, and I'm presuming they told him to steer clear of me. Well, the bottom line was that guy didn't have the guts to just tell me, hey, I can't talk to you. That's what I would have done if the situation were reversed. But he didn't. He didn't have the guts to do that. Instead, he lied to me. So, to answer your question, no, I don't take him very seriously, Mark. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Gerry?
Well, we know that Lou Elizondo has been under a lot of embarrassing statements that he's made, showing a photo that was proven not to be what it was, as well as just recently, with the last week or two, the supposed video footage of a sphere flying in the clouds that has been scrutinized by a lot of the people that we know. And basically, I see a lot of celebration over in the Twitter sphere by a lot of the ufology people that I'm following, that Lou Elizondo is finally being taken to the mat and scrutinized the way he should have always been. And it's a problem. This is what I just complained about to the guys, is that you've got a handful of people that are trying to make themselves the funnel of information that's being fed into the community. And that's fucked up. You can't have that. It's got to be an across the board shared thing, or it's being controlled, which is why, you know, so many people are saying that Lou Elizondo and Jeremy Corbell, and your old acquaintance as well, are basically controlled information spouts. And it falls back to disinformation, to where you don't know how much of what you're getting from them is truth and how much of it is intentional disinformation being done and controlled by, I don't know, the CIA, FBI, NSA. They're all in cahoots with this stuff. And it's gotten to where now, being friends with Mark here, I don't trust anybody anymore. And I don't trust anything from the History Channel, because I think the History Channel is another resource for government agencies to control that outgoing information and to put choke points in there.
These guys got what they wanted, Gerry. They want
money. They're getting money for it.
I don't know if it's always money. They wanted to be a funnel that the stuff would come through, right? So then they get the stuff from whomever so they can be the funnel. They asked for that. Well, that's a problem.
And the question I have, Don, is when it deals with these guys, I feel like, I want to know what you think. Do you consider that moment when Jeremy Corbell and your old acquaintance said that they had dead man switches was the moment where everybody questioned, where you couldn't trust them anymore? Because if they have information that they have on a dead man switch, why isn't that being released?
Well, okay. I guess this is one of those occasions where I've got to be brutally honest. And the fact of the matter is, as soon as I heard dead man switch, I thought to myself, horse shit.
Greer.
If there's anybody that at some point, hey, this is not self-aggrandizement, okay? But if there's anybody that got involved in some sticky situations over the last 30 plus years, it's yours truly, okay? Like I said, I broke some big stories. I embarrassed a lot of people. I butted heads with people at the Pentagon. I butted heads with people in NASA. Every skeptic at that time in the United States, people like
Oberg.
Jim Oberg, okay, is one. But back in those days, the great big bugaboo was Philip Klass. Now, Klass was a world-renowned skeptic, and I busted his bubble so bad in January of 95. He was a guest on my radio show. At that time, it was called UFOs Tonight. Very, very popular show on the cable radio network, CRN. And we got into a discussion about the Washington, D.C. overflights in July and early August of 1952. Okay. And he was poo-pooing the whole thing. Oh, that was crap. It was this, it was that. And I said, he said, and they finally flew a jet in, okay, to D.C., Took them an hour to get it there. They finally got one there, and nothing was there when he showed up. And I said, well, Phil, they flew it in from Delaware. Yeah. And I said, Washington, D.C., there's Air Force bases all over. Why didn't they fly it from there? Well, they flew it from Delaware. I said, look, the fact of the matter is, and I checked with Al Chop. Do you know who Al Chop was? At that time, Al Chop was the public civilian spokesperson for the Air Force dealing with the UFO situation, which in the early 50s, believe me, newspapers all over the country were running stories on UFO situations and cases. It's not like today or like it was 15, 20 years ago, where you barely ever see any mention of the topic. Back then, they reported on it, okay? And I said, Chop told me the reason it took so long to get a jet there was because all the Air Force bases in D.C. at that time were being resurfaced, all right? They were being repaired and resurfaced. Now, remember, this was the dawn of the jet age. This was a hell of a lot different than when everything was propeller-driven aircraft. These jets were like the Sabre jet, the F-86, the Super Sabre, the F-100, and a lot of others, the F-94 Panther, and all these other jets. Okay, they did a lot of they had to keep things in repair, and class on the air broke up, screaming at me, bullshit. Now, this is 1995, right?
Right.
And it's not like today, like here on KGRA, you can get away with usually a mild profanity, unless you're Gerry, and then you throw a lot of F-bombs around. Yeah, I've been counting, Gerry. So anyway, I said, Phil, you're on the radio. Fine, good night. And he hung up on me. So yeah, I've had my runaround with all of these people. So the bottom line is, like I said, you got to look at each one individually and then make your determination on what or why or where, what are they trying to pull. And in the case of some of these people, like you won't mention his name, I will, Steve Greer. Greer many times has been shown to, let me be polite here for a second, to misrepresent the facts, okay? Whereas at one point he was declaring he had been briefed at CIA, all right? And at the time, if I'm not mistaken, the guy that was in charge of CIA, I think was Woolsey. At any rate, this story got around so much that Greer was claiming to have been briefed by the CIA director, that Woolsey came out with a public letter saying, no, I was at dinner with my wife and another couple, and this guy approached our table and started talking to us. And that was the extent of any briefing. So yeah, a lot of it is pure, unadulterated horse shit. That was a mild profanity, by the way, Gerry. That was a mild one.
It's also fertilizer, so it's okay.
Well,
how would you conceptualize what's going on today as what went on in the 90s, which was a huge deal, a huge time period for, the release of the videos and the stories and the this and the that. In what ways is what's happening today different in some profound way than in the 90s when we had our last huge blow up on this subject.
Well, once again, at the risk of sounding like I'm blowing my trumpet, I'm not. I'm just stating the facts. In the early 90s, going up until about roughly 1997, there were few and far between weeks when I, as a representative of UFO Magazine, was not on some talk show. The shows that I did almost weekly were, well, God, I can't even think of a lot of the names now of the shows that I did, but they were reporting on UFO stories weekly, okay, and shows that you would never think. Oprah Winfrey, for God's sake, all right? They had Bud Hopkins on there, and that was something else. But some of them were very tawdry. Some of them were pretty good because they seemed like they were shooting for the facts. And there were a lot of other things at that time that fanned the flames. One of the most popular TV shows, and here we are, 2025, all right? Think back to if you were around. A lot of people that are into this field today, God, have been born between like 93 and 2000, so they may have no reference or context to some of the things I'm about to say. But one of the most popular, not to be missed TV programs on the tube at that time was The X-Files, okay? The X-Files with agents Mulder and Scully, all right? And when I tell you that was especially for the UFO aficionados, was a not missed program. Oh, God, it was. The first season was spectacular. And then Chris Carter got a little away from the alien thing. He couldn't believe it. They lost a lot of viewers. They wanted UFO stuff. They got back to the UFO stuff, and it blew right along. This was one reason. Another reason was that, well, for example, then we had UFO Magazine. We were publishing it every month, okay? It was literally going around the world. We did a lot of stuff in there, including brand new book reviews, what was happening in the field, what was happening. I'll give you an example. In about 95, all right, now we had, because of what we did, we had a lot of connections with Hollywood, all right? Knew a lot of people in Hollywood. I knew a hell of a lot of producers because of all the appearances I had been making on a lot of these TV shows. And we got word that a new film was in the works called Independence Day, ID4. All right. Now, Vicki and I, and we had another writer with us then, ended up doing almost a full magazine spread on this show. Why? Okay. Because it was just a stupid movie, right? Well, no, not really. One of the big things about this movie involved Area 51, that legendary place first brought to the public by George Knapp and Bob Lazar. Now, Area 51 has been there since about 1953 or so. This is a place so far outside of, well, it's like literally like going to another planet. I've been out there a number of times, and I got to tell you, if I've ever seen a more godforsaken, shitty place, it's out there in the Nevada desert. And what do? Well, I can tell you this much, that without a doubt, are at that time top of the pile spy craft were flying out there or were developed out there. The U-2 spy plane, the SR-71, okay? Now, the SR-71, the Blackbird, all right, and I'm sure you probably know what that is. If not, pop it into your search engine. This is an aircraft that's today considered obsolete, but its top speed is still a military classified thing. You can't get the exact numbers on that because it's classified. Where did it come from? Well, primarily the Central Intelligence Agency. Remember, when this thing really became known to the public was later. But when I was in Okinawa, okay, before I went back to Vietnam, I was in Okinawa. There was big, and I guess still is, I haven't checked on it in years, a big Air Force base there called Naha. And I'll never forget, I had a little car then. I forget what I was doing. I was on some off time. I was tooling around. And I drove down the highway there past the airfield. Suddenly, now, I will also mention this, that at that time, we were dropping bombs by the gazillion, okay, in places like Vietnam, South Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. We didn't talk about those things. And occasionally North Vietnam. A lot of those aircraft, those B-52 bombers, were flying out of Okinawa. As a matter of fact, one time I can remember driving down there and seeing the 52s lined up on the airstrip being loaded with 500-pound bombs. All right, I can remember seeing this. Wish to hell I'd have had my camera. I'd love to have taken some pictures of that. But the other thing was the SR-71, the Blackbird, was being flown out of there. And where was it going? Well, obviously, flying over North Vietnam, China, and let's not forget North Korea, because they were getting all kinds of data from those aircraft. And this damn thing, this SR-71, could fly practically, not quite, into outer space. That's how high this thing would go. The U-2 could fly at 70,000 feet. And that was much less intricate than what the SR-71 was. The SR-71 could fly damn near 85, 90,000 feet, probably. So, yeah, there's nothing in the world that could have touched it. No missiles, no jet aircraft, fighters trying to catch it. Wouldn't happen. This thing flew over 2,000 plus miles an hour. So, yeah, there was some weird stuff going on there. But here's something else that a lot of people are not familiar about. And I knew about it then. And I wasn't involved in research at that time, but I knew it from people like books I had read, Frank Edwards, Don Kehoe, others. There was a triangle over there by Japan that they called the Devil's Triangle. Much like here in the States, the Bermuda Triangle. And they had
there's one in Alaska too.
I'm not talking about Alaska, Gerry. I'm talking about the Far East.
Mute him. All right, fine, mute him.
I can tell you that they've lost as many aircraft and as many ships over there in this area with obviously no public acknowledgement of this, but it's there. And I would imagine it's still occasionally gobbling things up. So, yeah. Now, I am aware, though, about the Alaska Triangle, Gerry. I do know about that. But, yeah, this is something that I knew more about than what supposedly is up in Alaska, where, incidentally, close to that area is purportedly an underground, under a mountain, extraterrestrial base. And we've been hearing stories about that.
Oh, the
literally
Black Pyramid.
for decades.
Yeah.
And pyramids.
We'll have to continue this on the side of the hour because we're getting so close to the end. But just in summary, where do you see ufology going? Do you think that it's achieved anything at this point of being more serious, or do you feel like it's so full of snake oil salesmen that it's hard to filter?
I would, if you guys don't mind, I would prefer to pick that up.
Okay, we'll pick
in the
it
next
up
segment because
I have another question that goes with that too.
It's not a short answer.
Okay.
Well, let's go to break, Skywatcher.
Hold on to your seats, Cosmic Explorers. KGRA Digital Broadcasting, the unrivaled #1 source for raw, uncensored paranormal and UFO talk radio, has just unleashed a sizzling online merch store. Stay cosmic on the move with accessories, rugged phone cases, vibrant yoga mats, and notebooks perfect for jotting down UFO sightings. Ignite your obsession with the unexplained through bold, exclusive gear that demands attention. Kicking off with the Supernova, the store launches 2 heart-pounding collections, KGRA Digital Broadcasting and Bishop James Long. Every item you grab helps power the network and its groundbreaking shows. Stand with the truth seekers. Act fast, score your stellar swag, and join the uprising today.
All right, so we're back for the second half of the show, and I'll go ahead and reform my question for you, Don. Where can because there's a lot of people that are new to this. You would call them the uninitiated. Where would some of these uninitiated that really do believe that there's might be intelligent life and UFOs might be real, and but aren't sure where to go? And there are so many people out there spreading disinformation. Where can they trust stuff like this? Can they go to MUFON? Can they go to KGRA and find all those answers? Or do you feel that there's some other resources out there that could help them learn to do their own research and reading?
Well, there are a number of researchers out there that I've always had regard for. One of them is Kevin Randall. Now, Randall is a prolific author, okay? And his former writing partner that he collaborates occasionally with is Don Schmidt. Schmidt is another resource that I would recommend. Richard Dolan has done some amazing work and research, but like anything else, if you want to get somewhere with this, you've got to work to do it. You've got to do research. You've got to look at what has been done previously. Books like, for example, Above Top Secret, one of the earlier books by Timothy Good. Books like Larry Fawcett and, oh God, it's right here somewhere. Okay. Books like, 1776. No, that's not going to do it. Here we go. Clear Intent, the government cover-up of the UFO experience. And some lesser-known books that I've got no financial ties to any of this stuff, but there's been a researcher out there. I lost contact with him a few years ago, but he had his finger on the pulse, especially of those usual suspects. The guy's name is Gerry Beckham, Beckum. And I have told anybody that ever asks that, do you really want to know some of the shenanigans that go on in this field? Go up to the Amazon Book Center. Pop in Gerry Beckham's name. He's got 4 books up there, and I could not recommend them any higher than I do. The very first one in the series is called Spies, Lies, and Polygraph Tape. Okay, chock full of never before seen information. Some of the other aspects of the field: interdimensionality, quantum
entanglement,
strangeness.
Yeah.
My personal research project for over 20 years, lunar questions on lunar transient phenomena, and some photographs I found that nobody had ever seen before from NASA archives showing artificial objects on the moon. This book is called To the Moon and Back with Love. Now, this is primarily about a guy by the name of Ingo Swann, who was regarded even today, he's been dead a few years now, one of the most psychically gifted people on the planet. He was the man that designed the protocols. He had a top secret clearance, was in the Stargate program, remote viewing, okay? And the people that I talked to when I was still at UFO Magazine about that program, to a man, were absolutely awestruck by Ingo Swann. Now, I knew Ingo. I met him because of my moon research. I had been invited back to Bordentown, New Jersey, by a UFO guy back there, Pat Marcatilio. And he asked me if I would come back and give a talk on my research on the moon. Now, basically, my thesis was then, and still is, there is a presence on the moon. It's my belief, not only my belief, but other things over the years that have come forward, that there is perhaps a very ancient base on the rear of the moon. The side of the moon we never see because it's tidally locked, okay, circling our planet. We never see that, but the astronauts did. So did the Chinese when they sent their robot probes up there, and the Russians. Now, both China and Russia and Japan, okay, let's not forget Japan has a booming space agency, okay, don't talk about what they see up there. And I believe that there's, I don't know if it's an official agreement or if it's a, coin a term, a gentleman's agreement, that there are certain things that our governments will not address. That would certainly be one of them. But Swann came down to hear my talk. We met, became friends. He had family out here on the West Coast. Occasionally would come out to see them. And when he would come out, they would let us know. He would let us know, Vicki and I, and we would have dinner with him. And I had a dinner with Swann at a small Italian restaurant in Burbank, California. One of the most memorable nights of my life, Vicki and I. Okay. Over about a 4.5, 5 hour period, we had some fantastic Italian food, several bottles of very fine Italian wine, and some brilliant conversation by Ingo. So, yeah, his story is detailed pretty well in here. But Swan wrote a book. I have an actual hard copy of it. It's practically impossible to get that book today in hard copy, but it's titled Penetration. That's the name of the book, Penetration. Now, someone, I have no idea who, scanned his book, and it's online. If you would be interested in tracking this down, put it in your search engine, Ingo, I-N-G-O, Swan, S-A-W-N-N, and Penetration. You can find it and download it. And believe you me, it's worth the read.
Absolutely great. By the way, Commander Cobra is in the chat, and he said something here. General Welch, Air Force Chief of Staff, killed the SR-71. Rumor is because he was not selected to pilot it earlier in his career.
Really?
Yeah.
Hey, Charlie Deuce, glad to hear you, bud.
So Don, if you had to talk to the newer generations who are not going to read books, they are not going to download PDFs and read them. They are going to watch documentaries. They're going to watch the History Channel. They're going to watch TikTok and YouTube and all that. Would you just not consider them, or would you have any sort of recommendations for the people who aren't reading anymore, which are millions of people?
Okay, all right. I'm going to answer this in the only way I know how. Okay? If that is your attitude, think about it like this. Sex, all right? You've got the possibility of sex with real people, regardless of your taste, men, women, whatever, or masturbation. Now, masturbation feels great when you're doing it, but when you're done, then what? You got nothing, all right? Nothing. And if that's how you're going to react toward the UFO topic, that I'm going to watch YouTube videos and I'm going to watch people on TikTok, and I'm not going to waste my time actually finding out what's been there before. Hey, do what makes you feel good, but you're not going to get anywhere and you're not going to learn anything else. Now, earlier, before we went to break, Gerry, you said when you asked that really long question, and you rephrased it when we came back from break, but originally you said something to the effect of, let me see now if I can recall exactly what it was. But the bottom line was people that what's the difference today between back in the 90s or whatever? Do you see much difference? And I was kind of excited, or words to that effect. I paraphrased, obviously.
But you're right in the ballpark, because I was wanting to know more about how, because with the advancements in internet technologies, to where, we had bulletin boards early on, then we had, these groups, and then you had MySpace and all of that. But in leaps and bounds, technologically, we have moved so much to where now these people that I worry about can utilize these spaces.
Well, let me answer.
And how concerning is that now? Is it worse today?
I observed things in 2017 that I would have never believed in the 90s. All right. One of those things, now, whether this is a Pentagon dog and pony show, and I kind of suspect this may be part of it, okay, it would have been unheard of for somebody like Christopher Mellon, former Undersecretary of State, dealing with military intelligence, to come forward publicly talking about the UFO situation. I would have never believed that, okay?
Right.
When I tell you that I butted heads with these people, there was a firm mandate. Nobody in military or government service would ever speak about UFOs except and only except to ridicule them or ridicule the people reporting them. You know, for decades, commercial airline pilots, if they encountered something, they would not report it to anybody. You know why? Because the first thing the airline would do would be to ground that person, okay, send them to a shrink to have them evaluated, all right? And the same military, all right? If a military person came forward to report on a UFO, they shit-canned that guy, all right? Shit-canned him. It's all different now. Now, a lot of things that I considered, and believe me, I've been doing this a long time, and I've thought about this, my God, the time that I've wasted thinking about this subject. But the bottom line is, are UFOs real? You bet your bottom dollar they're real. Where did they come from? I don't know. And nobody else that I'm aware of knows either. The very upper echelon in the government may have much more information, and I'm sure they do, than what you or I have. But look, these objects have demonstrated capabilities that we would be very hard-pressed today to duplicate in 2025. In 1953, all right, one of the deans of researchers in this field, honest to God, legitimate, real, nose against the grindstone, was a man by the name of Donald Keyhoe, Major, United States Marine Corps, retired. Donald Keyhoe, if you're not familiar with him, was a graduate of the Annapolis Naval Academy in 1922. Keyhoe became a Marine officer. You can choose to go either Navy or Marine when you graduate Annapolis. And he became a pilot. Donald Keyhoe took the first air group into the island of Guam years before World War II began. All right. Keyhoe was severely injured in a plane crash. All right. Ultimately, medically retired. All right. Became an aviation writer. And in many regards, Keyhoe can be credited for bringing the whole UFO topic to light. Initially, he heard these reports in the late 40s, thought it was all malarkey, was crap, didn't believe it. But as it turned out, Keyhoe at that time had many contacts in the military that at then, late 40s, he had known from the 20s, some of them from his academy days. One of them, okay, that was a classmate of his, was Admiral, the first director of the Central Intelligence Agency. The name will come to me in a minute, probably.
Oh,
but at any rate,
Hillenkotter. Oh, Hillenkotter.
Hillenkotter had been a classmate. And they had frank, open, between the two of them, discussions about this. And there were people then in the armed forces. Now, remember, This was just a couple of years after World War II ended. The most prohibitively costly in terms of not only national treasure, but human life in our recorded history. Anywhere to 60 to 80 million people died in that war. All right? Now imagine that. Just our development of the atomic bomb cost billions. And back in those days, a family of four could live on 15, 20 bucks a week. That's how good their money went. And billions using that criteria to develop this bomb. Now, it was after the detonation of 3 atomic bombs. The first one was the test in July of 45 in New Mexico. The second was Hiroshima, and the third was Nagasaki. So the bottom line is, suddenly, after centuries and millennia of nobody knowing anything about atomic weaponry or nuclear reaction physics, anything, suddenly here's this primitive bunch of hairless monkeys. By the way, that's you and I. And they're using atomic weapons. Now, that had to get somebody's attention. And apparently it did, because that's when these unknown objects started showing up in mass, and they demonstrated a particular interest in nuclear facilities. All right, something else you don't hear a lot about, especially today. And why? Because the majority of people in this field that call themselves ufologists don't know their ass from third base on the history of this. Okay, it's scary. Now, to get back to what I was saying. Okay, 2017, Harry Reid, the former senior senator from Nevada, all right, came forward with an open presser talking about getting, and it's not even pocket change by military standards, around $22 million to finance this ATIP program in the Pentagon, Aerial Threat Assessment Program. Now, what the hell were they talking about? Well, obviously, one of them had to be the UFO thing. Oh, and by the way, UFO thing. Yeah, this is something else that I had to smile at. Back in the 40s, they were known as saucers or flying saucers. Then the Air Force jumped forward and said, nah, that's not serious enough. We're going to call them UFOs, unidentified flying objects. And that was catchy. It caught on. But suddenly it wasn't catchy enough any longer. Suddenly, just a couple of years back, they started calling it UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Now, what the hell's with that? A rose is a rose is a rose. They smell just as good, right? Well, what did the UAP thing? Give it a new sheen, a new glamour? I don't know. But to me, they're still UFOs.
Well, they claim that it was to get away from the stigma of the acronym UFO. It's like you're just changing, and it's going to be the same thing again.
Well, the bottom line is this. All right. There's something there. They've known about it for 70 plus years, because don't for a second think that all their denials about what this phenomenon meant, that they didn't take seriously. They took it real seriously. In fact, a document surfaced 25, 30 years ago. And God, I should have gone into my files and dug this thing up. It was an official Air Force document that, by the way, all copies were ordered to be destroyed. All right. And a few escaped destruction. but they talked about the fact that this was probably an interplanetary phenomenon. This is back in the 40s. All right. It was officially signed by a brigadier general. Okay. It was sent upstairs. They kicked it back and said, no, we can't have that. Destroy all these copies. And, well, they didn't get them all destroyed. But that was very obvious that the bottom line was, even then, they were fearful of the possibility, because they didn't know who these sentient beings, because obviously UFOs were being piloted by something, some intelligence, what they wanted, where they came from, what were their ultimate aims. I don't know then if anybody took the time to do a historical analysis on this phenomenon, because they could track it back practically to pre-biblical times. There have been things flying around up there, and ancient peoples talked about it, all right? So they apparently have been here a very long time. Now, even in the 40s, if they would have proven to be hostile, and not all incidents were friendly, there were hostilities demonstrated. In some cases, without provocation. I'm familiar with a number of cases where these objects popped up and demonstrated hostility by killing and burning people, or they were basically attacked. You know, at one point around 51, 52, the president of the United States, Harry S. Truman, ordered the Air Force to attempt to shoot one of these or more down so they could examine it and find out where they were coming from. Then cooler heads got to Truman and said, no, that's a bad idea. If they do come from outer space, that would seem to demonstrate a hell of a lot of technology that we don't have. Do you really want to piss them off like that? So that order was rescinded. But over the years, there have been incidents. Marina Popovich, when I met her in 91, I questioned her about incidents in the former Soviet Union. They too had a policy where they attempted to shoot some of these down. It backfired on them, and she told me they lost a lot of aircraft and pilots. They stopped that business. So yeah, these things can take care of themselves. But what are they up to? What do they want? I have no idea. But today, we know much more about this because of things like the congressional hearings a couple of years ago. Now, in the so-called disclosure movement today, there are people out there right now waiting with bated breath for the government to come forward. Now, you guys both know that I wrote a paper this past year on disclosure called Disclosure, a dangle too far. And by the way, dangle, that's an IC term, an intelligence community term, okay? But what basically did I say? By all accounts, all right? And by the way, the guy that originally put me onto this was Gary Beckham, all right? Gary Beckham, basically through his contacts, and he had a lot of contacts in the IC, in the intelligence community, basically said that something was discovered that had the powers that be, and I'm using his quote, not mine, had them shaking in their boots. Something that they discovered, that they made a determination then, this can never be revealed, ever, okay? It would turn basically the American people and also around the world on its head, whatever that thing was, okay? And this secret is secured by something called an SAP. SAP or SAP, Special Access Program. Now, what is that? A Special Access Program. That means that it's a military government secret, a project, something along those lines that is so highly classified that even if you were to ask somebody, hey, do you know about this project? Even if they said no comment, they would be basically, they could be charged with a felony. This mandates that if you do have some information, you may not know what it is, but you have some information. By policy, you must lie about it and say, no, I never heard of that. I know nothing about it. That's how deeply concerning this is. Now, I had an occasion to discover that. I also wrote a paper on that. That was called the Wilson Davis incident. Now, Thomas Wilson was an admiral. He was director of the DIA, that's the military's CIA in essence, except not CIA, it's Defense Intelligence Agency. They do a lot of spooky stuff, usually concerned with the military, all kinds of things. But he was basically asked by several people, including an Apollo astronaut, if he could find anything out about this cover-up, this UFO thing. Well, make a long story short, Wilson tried. He discovered that there's an aerospace corporation out here on the West Coast. Now, I don't know this for sure, but I think it's Lockheed, that have been working on a special access program way behind the scenes in the deep, deep dark. He called them up as the director of DIA and asked them about it on the phone. They said, well, we can't talk about anything like that on the telephone. If you want to talk about that, you would have to come out here. Purportedly, he did. He flew out, was taken into a skiff where he began to question them. The director of security at that place said, wait a minute. He said, I've got to get the Bigot book out, the Bigot book. He pulled out a book. The Bigot book basically has the names of those people authorized with a need to know. Okay, that's the important criteria, a need to know because of their duties. They have to know this, that, or something else that are cleared to be talked to with genuine information. The guy looked in there for Wilson's name. He said, well, sorry, Admiral, you're not in here. Have a nice flight back to D.C. Well, this guy was upset. And he was prepared to raise holy hell back at the Pentagon until somebody pulled him aside and basically said, well, you're going to be retiring soon. And there's a chance you're going to get another star in your collar when you retire. Do you really want to put that and your pension and everything else at risk? Well, purportedly, Wilson then cooled off. But one of the people that had been involved in this situation was Eric Davis. And he apparently had a private in the back seat of a car meeting with Wilson at EG&G down in Vegas. And, well, you can find out purportedly what Wilson told him. Now, later on, reporter Billy Cox, okay, and anybody in this field knows who Billy Cox is, C-O-X, Billy Cox. Purportedly, he called up Wilson to interview him. And Wilson denied everything. Well, this was obviously an SAP program. And by federal statute, Wilson had to deny everything. He couldn't admit that he knew anything about it. So, yeah, do I think it was real? I do. And it was Richard Dolan who originally reported on this, okay? Dolan did some great research on that. So, yeah. So the bottom line is today, are we any further ahead? Well, a lot of people think we are. I maintain we're not, because in my paper, I said whatever it is that they're covering up, they're going to cover it up till they go to the grave.
So then what are we to make of all of these whistleblowers who have come forward, both congressionally and even people like Crazy Greer, who are commenting on things covered in an SAP clearly, and nothing's happening to them. So evidently the government is using them to fill the funnel in the mouth of all of these other people, because they are talking about things that are covered in an SAP clearly, and they're being allowed to talk about this stuff if true, and nothing is happening to them.
Well, remember what I said. A Pentagon dog and pony show, okay? It feels great when you're doing it, but ultimately you get zippity-doo-dah out of it.
Well,
Nothing.
no, you don't really get zippity-doo-dah when you have Grush who comes out saying people are being murdered by ET.
Yeah, and we both saw how Congress just let that one slip right by.
Well, to even say that people are being murdered. Okay. Murdered in association with an SAP program?
Well, in 1947, and I document this in my disclosure paper, okay, immediately following the events of the Roswell incident, late June, early July, somewhere between the end of June and the 4th of July, 1947, suddenly 3 monumental things took place within
CIA.
weeks. Number one, okay, the Air Force, the Army Air Force was extracted from the United States Army, and they were made their own separate military agency, okay? Now, who has control of the skies, supposedly? The U.S. Air Force. All right, the Army was now out of the picture. Number two, even at the height of World War II, all right, we did not have a central intelligence authority. We had the OSS, but in many regards, they were a bunch of cowboys dressing up in German uniforms, parachuting in behind the enemy lines, blowing things up, shooting people, that kind of thing. But when it came down to real, honest-to-God intelligence, probably the best of the bunch at that time was the United States Navy, bar none. But suddenly, they take all of that and they fold it into a brand new government agency called Central Intelligence Agency. Pop, right there, a brand new bunch of spooks. And the third thing that happened, and this is the most chilling of all, the National Security Act was signed into law. Now, why do I say it's chilling? It's chilling. Well, quite simply because if this act is enacted, anything up to including premeditated murder may be conducted under the guise of a threat to national security. A threat to national security. If you are deemed a threat to national security and they want to take you out, poof, no problem, you're gone. Now, could this be some of those people that Grush was referring to? Look, the thing about Grush, and that's curious in itself, okay? Here's a guy that admits he's on the spectrum, the autism spectrum. Now, the guy definitely was an Air Force officer, definitely had a high security level, but why would they pick him to go forward? He had no firsthand knowledge of anything dealing with UFOs, extraterrestrials, or any of it. And Grush said on the record in Congress that everything he was telling them was second and third hand information. Why in the hell didn't they demand to get somebody in there that had firsthand information? I found that curious. Then something else, and believe me, when I was in the military, I was in an organization called the United States Army Security Agency, okay? Our command authority was not the Department of the Army. The stuff that we were doing was under the direct authority of the National Security Agency. As a matter of fact, I was in Vietnam twice. The government denied that they had any ASA personnel in the Republic of Vietnam, which was total pure bullshit. The very first casualty in the Vietnam conflict happened in 1961 with a guy, his name was Davis, that was not murdered. He was killed in a firefight with Viet Cong, the first U.S. casualty. Now, they can spin a yarn like you wouldn't believe. And the bottom line is all of it bespeaks of nothing more than a lot of smoke and a lot of mirrors. Hey, look, guys, the aliens, if they wanted to, the aliens could end this business right now. They could land somewhere and announce their presence. They're not doing that. Why? Because whatever they've been doing, apparently they've been doing it for millennia, and they're doing it behind the scenes, okay, where we have no knowledge of it whatsoever. Now, we do know that something is happening, but what the bottom line is, God only knows.
I was talking to Don about this the other day, and I didn't do a deep dive on this. There are better people like Red Panda and things that know how to do searches very well. But if you don't know who Richard Doty is or Rick Doty, go under your search engine of choice and type in this, Rick Doty or Richard Doty, UFO, Benowitz, and then try to find information on Doty, like his birth date, okay? Things of that sort. I can search okay. I used a few different search platforms. Nothing came up at all.
Well, Mark, this is where I gotta mention this book. Spies, Lies, and Polygraph Tape. Knowing the Future, the UFO Spy Games. Now, what Mark is talking about is Richard Doty, purportedly an AFOSI, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, who was purportedly ordered to run a disinformation program on a civilian scientist. This is a long, involved thing, but a civilian scientist by the name of Paul Benowitz, who the Air Force and Doty drove into a mental hospital. Now, one of the people that was very conversant in this whole thing was a former UFO researcher at one time, probably the top of the heap, by the name of William Moore, who committed professional, not dead, but professional suicide in July of '89. That's a story for another day. But One of the people that did a deep dive on Doty and what he did, and it's a big chunk of this book, was reported on by Gary Beckham. If you get no other book, if you're interested in this.
Yeah, I just ordered it so I can get my copy. I have one question from the chat for you, Don, that I highlighted, and I promised I was going to squeeze this question in. This is from a member of our audience, Benno from Oz, Australia, 1975. Don, do you feel that the moon was a giant space ark bringing the visitors here to alter/make life on Earth?
Well, I have no idea. This I can tell you. This much I do know. Now, there have been people like Don, author in the past, Don Wilson, who basically said he wrote a book, Our Mysterious Spaceship Moon. Okay, there are people that believe that. This I can tell you, that if it weren't for the moon, you and I wouldn't be here. The moon made it possible for life to develop on here, okay? The moon is in a very unique position. It's as if, and I'm not saying it is, but it's as if somebody positioned it to be in this optimum place, all right? Now, we do know that the moon has some vast cavities inside it.
Like
during the Apollo program, one of the things that NASA did, I don't know what their initial purpose was, but they crashed one of the booster rocket segments into the moon. They deliberately did that. And reportedly, the moon rang like a bell for hours and hours and hours. Okay. Now, what does that speak? Well, there's a hell of a lot of hollow space in there.
Yep.
But as to whether it was an arc, hey, weird things basically have happened. I wouldn't immediately discount that.
The reason I bring up the Doty thing is we're all very tied into cyber. We all do our own, lookups and all that stuff. And I don't know. Oh, I was watching Y-Files, an older one where he does a breakdown on Paul Binowitz and all that. It's worth a look for those people who don't want to read. So he does a good job on it. And I said, oh, gee, I wonder what would come up if I searched out Doty. Virtually nothing of any importance came up on any search engine that I used, which kind of tells me, gee, I guess I can't trust the search engines, can I? When I put in a name like that most of the public knows nothing about this guy at all. And yet,
well, Mark, all you needed to know about that is what happened during the pandemic.
Oh, okay? Right. But that affected
the election.
But that affected millions and billions of people. Doty on the surface doesn't, right? I mean, we could get into the balance of this, but in general,
why tamp down an unknown name? Yeah,
right. A virtually unknown name, and I'm looking at that going, wow, what actual involvement did this guy must have had to basically scrub in my searches from the internet, right?
Now, Greg Bishop, a name that should be known in this field, did an absolutely genius level book on the Paul Binowitz affair. He interviewed, among others, William Moore, and that guy, his hands were dirty, and he interviewed Richard Doty. As a matter of fact, Gerry, look that up on the web. Greg Bishop and Paul Binowitz. But yeah, he basically nailed that to the wall. So you would think that some of that material would make it to the web, and I'm kind of surprised.
I'm not saying it isn't, because I started going to a deep dive. I found a bunch of interviews with Doty on it, but I mean, just the basics like birth date and stuff like that. Not
this guy, yes. Yeah, I remember you telling me about this, and then I read up on it later that they drove him to self-deletion, and drove him insane.
Yeah. It kind of wakes me up to the fact where, why can't I find? I mean, quickly, okay. I'm not saying you can't find it, but I was just doing some searches, like, what is his birth date? Won't come up, right? Is he dead? Won't come up, right? And as well as I with AI now, when you start typing stuff in, stuff just starts to, like when I typed in Christopher Mellon and his quotes, a ton of stuff pops up, and his biggest quote that he's known for is, "The world is not ready for what disclosure will reveal." That's the biggest quote that he's known for. But it pops up, right? Boom.
Right.
But then I go to the Doty thing, and granted, I can find interviews and stuff like that. But as far, like, if I was to type in Christopher Mellon's birthday, you know what it would do? Pop up and show me. I'm sure it would. I don't even have to look it up.
Well, obviously somebody blocked him.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to tell you also, it depends on the search engine too, because like if I look up Don Ecker, because I do this just for shits and giggles sometimes, I'll write things in like Don Ecker believes his own bullcrap, and Google won't show me anything. But I don't look that up, Don.
Well, right. No,
but I do look up your name.
I try
and
to.
Brave is the only one that actually does a full AI fallout of layers of comments. Google doesn't do it.
Right.
Who does a layer?
Brave does a layered AI layout of all this information about you. Google doesn't. Even when I request Google's AI, it won't do it for me. Yeah. Odd, huh? On your name. Yeah, somebody at the Pentagon doesn't like you. And, I know that I wanted to come back to that thing because you brought it up earlier, Mark. The whole thing with Coulthard's statement about that he knows absolutely proof positive that the Tic Tac was Lockheed Skunk Works. And I'm like, where does this guy get these fucking brass balls?
Before he said the egg was the most important thing to ever be.
Yeah, I know. I absolutely believe News Nation is nothing more than a front for the CIA. They are a funnel for the CIA. I hope I don't get killed for this. Lots of things I don't mind dying for, but good God, I don't want to die for that statement. I have so many problems with all of that crap because it is a funnel system. And they all seem to be funneling the same way. And this is why I like Red Panda and our good friend Manny, Area 53. These guys are at the front of a current war on social media, fighting these guys. And they're fighting them. And finally, Manny and those guys have actually finally made some headway with hurting Lou Elizondo and all of his narratives. And it's got people from the media now calling him out on his bullshit. Like, how can somebody so in the know keep pulling up these videos that they know aren't real? How do you keep doing that?
They may not know they aren't real, but much like Jaime Maussan and his videos that he's been known for since the 90s, they seemingly don't care, and they have to get it out there, just like Howe and the rest of them. Get it out there. We got to get it out there before somebody else does.
Is that the videos? The
24-hour news.
Yes, the videos.
Yeah, the videos.
Videos.
Well, you've got that whole since the 90s, we started hitting that 24-hour news cycle, which technically it's a 72-hour news cycle, where the first to get it is more important than the first to get it right.
Well, and
that's what that falls under.
And there's never follow-up. Never any follow, or at least guys like Don, the older guard, they will look back and say, I got this right. I may be wrong on this, or I may have a new view of this now. Well, you're not going to get that from these people. I'm not as up on the Las Vegas reporter Knapp as I probably should be, but I don't know if he necessarily looks back in his own personal archive and clears things up. Because, at one point he said there's evidence in my book about Skinwalker Ranch. And then when Joe Rogan asked him, he said, no, there's no evidence in the book.
These guys constantly contradict themselves on Joe Rogan and Sean Ryan. They're always contradicting themselves.
Well,
and calls them out on it.
I gotta mention one thing about Knapp. He and Colin Kellner wrote a book on the Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Vicky and I drove over to Vegas to have dinner with George and basically interview him because we did a review on his book. And one of the things that I had heard, not from just one, but several people, was that anybody that spent any time out at the ranch, some of them experienced phenomenon where something seemed to follow them home, like a poltergeist, okay? So I was talking to Knapp, and we were talking about this, and I said, George, I'm just going to ask you up front. I said, you've been out there for God knows how long. And I tried to get him, Knapp, to intervene with Bigelow so I could travel out there. And for whatever reason, of course, Bigelow's tied into the government. He might have asked somebody and said, don't give that son of a bitch anything. Oh, okay. So I couldn't get out there. But I asked Knapp, I said, this is what I've heard. People have claimed that something, an entity, poltergeist, followed them home. George, how about you? That ever happen? And he got real quiet. And then he said, yeah, it did. But then he wouldn't talk anymore about it. Mm-hmm. So, just as a...
we got to wrap it up, Don.
Yeah, we got to go, Don.
Well, I hope you guys... Did you learn anything?
Of course we
want to welcome
did.
you to the first and only episode of Mike and Gerry interviews.
God bless
Don
Sam
Ecker.
and Dean Winchester, and we'll see you at the next run around.
Double guns.
Good night, all.